There is nothing wrong with your screen. Do not attempt to adjust the picture. We are controlling the messaging in this transmission. We will tell you the topics you may speak about. We will remove any speech we deem unfit. We will identify and protect you from all that is evil. You need only put your full trust in us. We are the government, and we are here to help.
All right, Jack. How we doing, sir?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Welcome, everybody. We're here for another Wednesday night. I wanted to devote this one to just talking about this flurry of Supreme Court cases that have come out in the last few weeks. I mean, they have most certainly been busy, without a doubt. This is a group that, in a matter of 3 to 4 weeks, have ruled on the Second Amendment. Fortunately, to preserve it, have overturned Roe v. Wade, which is a landmark decision, and then on top of that, they validated prayer in schools, which is, three huge issues. Now, I don't know that they validated prayer in schools, although that's the way all of the articles read. When I read the opinion, it did not appear to be that. I don't know if you got a chance to read that opinion, Jack. Did you?
No, not at all. So I'm looking forward to hearing that, because I'm gonna learn from that.
Yeah, basically what they did is they ruled that it was free speech. But when you say that when they say in the articles and the headlines and things like that they somehow ruled, that for prayer in schools, it insinuates, and maybe it's just clickbait that these people are going after, but it insinuates to me when I read it that prayer was okay in schools now. And essentially, that's not at all what they were saying. At least I read a good portion of the majority opinion, and what it was saying, it was basically saying the coach, because if you're not aware of what the case was, the coach was praying, or he would say a prayer after a victory or after a game, and he'd go to the 50-yard line and say a prayer and pray. And I guess the team were doing it with him. So what the district had said is that he's not allowed to do that, and they fired him for doing that, and which is unconstitutional. And
Right.
and what they ruled on, though, is that he was not acting officially, like the scope of the school saying, well, he's always speaking anytime he's anywhere near a complex or anything like that, he's acting in a government capacity and therefore speaks on behalf of the government. They were like, that's too far a stretch. They were basically saying this guy was after the game. He wasn't coaching anyone. He wasn't doing anything that was in the scope of what that job description was. And therefore, as a result, he was not he was not at a government capacity. So therefore, it's an infringement on his speech to tell him he's not allowed to pray, or to take action against him for praying. So it was the right decision. It's still in the end, and it was still good, because they never should have fired him for that's just one of those overreaches where they're stretching church and state like it's friggin', like it's one of those, what was it, Armstrong, right? Stretch Armstrong, those old dolls they had. But, and they do that with church and state and misinterpret it constantly. And this was an example of that. But this is not something that, like, it's not like the kids now are going to have prayer sessions in the beginning of school or anything like that. It has nothing to do with what's going on inside the classroom. This was more a completely separate ruling. I think the media took off with it the way they did because they were so fired up about Roe v. Wade. They wanted, it's more like they want to scare their base, basically, their atheist, godless, heathen base, to, oh my God, now they're going to allow prayer. We're all going to, like, one of those.
You mean the Posts? the posts were coming in, the posts were misleading that you read.
They weren't posts. These were articles. This was everywhere. Like
Okay.
all the lead-ins were, Supreme Court rules in favor of prayer in schools, overturns ruling against prayer in schools, prayer in schools, prayer in schools. Everyone using prayer in schools, and yeah, technically it was prayer at a school facility, but it wasn't prayer in schools.
School. Right.
So,
Right.
so in that sense, still a big deal, still a big decision, but just not, not as groundbreaking as the other two, which, I guess we'll get to Roe last, but the concealed carry was the other big one that got overturned. And, that's where New York City was saying they were basically denying everyone who applied a concealed carry permit.
Right.
And telling and saying you need to have special cause, a specific cause. It was almost like, if someone chased you down here with a gun, then you can apply, for a concealed carry permit. Like self-defense wasn't considered a reasonable reason for someone to apply for a gun.
Yeah, and
court
you had to
shut it
reapply.
down.
You had to reapply every so often.
Right. But I mean, it didn't, they wouldn't even, unless you had evidence of someone trying to attack you at that moment, they wouldn't even give you the permit in the
Right.
first place.
Right.
And then they were giving out these weird, it's good only in rural areas for hunting and whatever. And it was so against the Second Amendment. It was crazy, and that's where I opined in our video where and even in the prayer one, those same three Dutaroos voted against the justices voted against it, and so that's actually two major amendments that we have three Supreme Court justices now who are perfectly fine. They're perfectly fine to shoot down those amendments.
Right. Well, it goes back to that, view of it being a living document, and
Right.
Which it's not the way it is a living document, but in the sense that you can make amendments. There's a process. Their job is to rule on what exists, not to really take these leaps, looking at the 14th Amendment and saying, well, that does encompass abortion. Well, no, it doesn't. And so we have an amendment process.
Yeah, and look, the amendment process, no one's a bigger advocate of the amendment process than us, right?
Right.
I mean, in the end, that's what we do. We preach Article 5. It's our thing. This is what, this is what gets us fired up. Now we're doing it for not to change existing amendments. We're there to add in amendments to restrict the power of the federal government. What the courts are doing, though, and right now I can't say they're doing it because in the end they're making the right decisions. But where people need to be concerned and where this needs to get looked at is what if this was an all leftist court or even a majority leftist court? I mean, they'd be changing the Constitution right and left. The Second Amendment would have completely different meaning today than it did, a couple of weeks ago if this was an all leftist court. The First Amendment, religious expression, would have a completely different meaning today than it did even a few days ago if this was an all leftist court. I mean, it's a serious concern because it's not a philosophical debate about this living Constitution thing. This is judges who are hiding behind a bizarre philosophy who are using that philosophy to literally do something that only the people should be able to do, and that's amend the Constitution of the United States. I mean, if you change the meaning of the Second Amendment, it's the same equivalent as another amendment.
Right.
Is it not?
Well,
right. So
I mean, yes and no in my mind. So their job is not to take that and interpret it and make a leap. If the Second Amendment requires any provision, then that is a process that we should be going through. It's not something the courts should interpret based upon the way they
Right.
view it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's not, but that's what they do, right? That's
Yeah,
what the
it
courts
is.
do. That's why Article 5 is so important, right? Because the only way to really overcome a horrific court decision is through constitutional amendment. I mean,
Right.
that's it. And so far, only the left have used that. Like so far, only the left have used the amending the Constitution as a way to get around the courts, and, until and then all of a sudden they decided, you know what, let's just do everything through the courts, and then they start firing off all of these federal judges at lower levels who make all these dingbat decisions, and they hope that they don't get brought to the Supreme Court, or that at some point they can get some love from the Supreme Court. But in the end, like if we don't, all these weird interpretations that they've made, like clearly there's some clarity needed. Like
Mhm.
clearly there's something needs to be written in a way where a court cannot misinterpret it, where a court cannot just take it and say, oh well we feel if, and this is what the living document thing is that they say, well, we feel if the founders were alive today under the current socioeconomic circumstances, blah 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 blah. And it's like, what are you talking about? It's like that has nothing to do with what your job is. But there are justices now who are chosen because they believe that. Like they're
Right.
picked because they believe that. And like the conservative to liberal justice thing, the fact that these decisions get quote unquote done on party lines, it's not a conservatives aren't, it's a different animal. Like what a judge that's picked by a conservative is picked because he's a constructionist, because he believes, like the general belief in conservatism is just that, is that that you should interpret the Constitution the way it's written, not the way you would like it to be. And if you want to change it, there's a process for that. But that process is not to get willy nilly with the interpretation. You got to stick to the letter of the law, the letter of the Constitution. That's different than what the leftists are doing. Like they're just straight, like they keep trying to confuse the issue, which is what they do, and act like these guys are legislating from the bench. They're not legislating from the bench. They're just simply not. They have such disdain, these leftists, these Marxists, for the Constitution, that they think it's being an activist to uphold it. Like they think you're a radical if you want to uphold the Constitution.
Well, I think the
And they
confusing part, I think the confusing part for the general public, we've had abortion for the last 50 years, right? So now you have all these people that have grown up with it, and they think it's part and parcel of their rights built into the Constitution. It's all they've ever known, and that's all they've ever heard, right? And so it really takes a bit of a re-education on them. Their rights were not denied. Essentially, we just went back to recognizing that they weren't provided for within the Constitution. And and where do I have it in my school? 14th Amendment. No, I don't have the 14th, but the second section of what is it? Article 1 of the 14th Amendment, Section 2, really is what covers the abortion issue. So,
but it covers that case, and it really refers to the physician, not to women's rights or to anything. Like the privacy issue was about the physician. Like they're even conflating that. Like Ruth Bader Ginsburg even had a problem with that, where she was like, she didn't like the way that it was upheld, the way that it was tried. Constitutional lawyers and scholars understood for many decades that this was an incredibly vulnerable decision, because they knew that it should never have been taken up. Like they knew that this was an issue of morality and not of law. Like there is no place for a court to decide when a life becomes feasible, like which is the term that they used. There is no place for a court. They're not qualified to make that determination, yet they did so in Roe v. Wade, and again in Heller. Like they made this inference that like there's this like there's this solid line as to when a fetus becomes an official life, and it's completely arbitrary and subjective. There's just
Right.
there's just as many scientists who will tell you it's a living organism the second the cells come together, right? And
Well,
there
I
are
don't think
plenty of
there's,
scientists. We consider
well,
that life on Mars, don't we?
there isn't a biologist worldwide that is going to tell you that life does not begin at inception. If anything, you might have some of them that just won't answer you. But
I'm
it's
sure.
it's
I'm sure there are political scientists who will come out and make that case.
oh,
I don't know of
neither
any,
do,
but I'm sure that
yeah,
they're there.
neither do I. But a biologist, there's biology is straightforward.
Is it?
The body. Yeah, in today's day and age, right? Yeah. Well, they figure out how to get around biology, but biology is biology. And,
Well, one of our beloved justices doesn't even know what a woman is.
yeah, no, I know.
So,
But
I mean, when you look at it, is that even the case anymore? Like, these people are playing by a bizarre set of rules and a bizarre set of logic that makes no sense. When you look at the case for, and I just dropped this video with Margaret Sanger, and I definitely want to talk about her, because I always knew about Margaret Sanger. I always knew that she was, the creepy one and whatever, that had, her history was foul and whatnot. But when I actually went to look into her to make that video and started really like reading some of the stuff that she had said, and some of the things that she's, that she's, because when you look at it all as a painted picture, and you see that this woman was not just a racist, she was like it's not just she hated, inferior races, she wanted to exterminate them. Like, she didn't just not like them. She wanted to exterminate them, and said as much. And listening to the stuff that she says, and I put some of those quotes in the video where she, she says things when she's talking to that Clarence Gamble guy, the Dr. Clarence Gamble, and she writes him this letter, and it's crazy what she says in this letter. I mean, I don't know if you got a chance to watch the whole thing. I know I just put it out yesterday. It's only like 20 minutes long, but I mean, she goes ahead, we don't want them to, we want to get ministers and physicians, we want to get black ministers and physicians so that we can train them, which is essentially saying brainwash them and get them to buy in and let them go into the black community with enthusiasm and vigor. And it was just, I'm just reading it, and I'm just like, I can't believe, and it just shows you what the difference between 1939 and now is, right? But I can't believe that woman was saying those types of things, where we can't let them know that we want to extinguish the black population. The ministers will be the ones who will be able to ease the frustrations in case anyone gets, what did she say? In case, to be able to quell the more rebellious ones, right? So if there are any free thinkers involved in the group, we can send the ministers to them to sell them on the idea. And then everybody they sold it to was sold as healthcare. Everybody they sold it to. And then you look at the end result 50 years later. And Margaret Sanger would have been like, great job, guys. Great job.
It's actually been almost 100 years, George.
Well, from her, yes, but like I'm saying, from the time Roe v. Wade, from the time this became legal, right, where it was not up to the states anymore, and they got that through. Which, by the way, again, they started pushing right after civil rights. They started pushing this Roe v. Wade deal, and finally got Roe v. Wade into the Supreme Court, and got what they wanted. And then when you look at those results, like when you look at what it was founded on, Planned Parenthood, when you look at the actual goals, the eugenics goals and all that, it wasn't just blacks. She wanted to kill off anybody with a mental disability, anybody with any kind of physical disability, anybody who was poor. She wanted to kill off like everybody. And I'm sitting there like, well, this chick is the most mentally disturbed person I've read about in I don't know how long. She should be the one that they're sterilizing and friggin' and putting to bed. I'm like, because, but when you see the end result, though, when you listen to everything she wants to accomplish, and you see the end result, where most of the abortions are people with disabilities, minorities. All of their clinics, almost all of them, are in inner city neighborhoods. And you look at the mortality rate from abortion, it was some 20 million. So 20 million black babies have been aborted since Roe v. Wade.
Right.
There are about 46 million black people in the United States, like black Americans now. So that's about 50% of their population that she just nixed.
Yeah, and I thought it was actually double. I thought that since Roe v. Wade, their population would have doubled without abortion.
No. So when I said this in the video, I actually had to put text in there to correct myself. For whatever reason, I said that in the video. I said 40 million abortions, but it was actually 20 million. And I recognized it right before I published the video. So I put it in text that flashed up when I said that to make the correction that it was actually 20 million. But it's still...
See how carefully I listen to you?
Yeah. But in the end, it's still... What it is, though, it shows that, I mean, there were some 36% of all abortions were to African American or black minorities, Americans. Not even minority Americans. It was black Americans. Like that was not adding in Latinos and any other minority. This was just black people. Now they make up 13 to 14% of the population, but 36% of all abortions are from them. So in the end, when you look at that and you line that up with what the creation of Planned Parenthood was all about, how do you not see that? Like, how do you, like, this is one of those, once you see, you cannot unsee. How do you unsee that? Like, I just don't know how that's even possible. Here's David says the country should be run by the Constitution. I'm not going to pretend I know the whole thing, but it's structured for direction. I wonder how that basketball player feels about the USA now sitting in a Russian jail. They don't tolerate any. Yeah, well, the Russians operate under a different premise than we do, right? So that's one of those wake up calls that someone breaks the law in Russia and they think, well, I'm an American, you can't do this. It's like, yeah, we can.
Yeah, they can.
Yeah, and good luck getting Biden to negotiate for you. That's just not going to happen. That's just not going to happen. And
go ahead.
No, you go.
All right. So, it's interesting. So I was watching some clips from The View, right? And I saw Whoopi Goldberg go absolutely nuts. And all right, fair enough. That's her feelings, and very emotional about it. But all I could think was, if she were to look at the bigger picture, this is part of, the overall game plan to suppress people. And I don't understand how she can't see that. You have, the majority of Planned Parenthood in your cities. Their culture is structured in such a way where it's like, it's cool to be a gang member. Abortion is okay. A lot of negativity. And stature comes with the bling that they wear, right? And and that's what all gets promoted. So it's not a healthy society that's being built. And every time I see people break away from Clarence Thomas, the list goes on, Larry Elder, people break away from that stereotype and they're being called an Uncle Tom, which I don't know that people really, have ever read, Uncle Tom So for example, if I were to call somebody an Uncle Tom, what do you think that means?
You're calling him the slave that would live in the house and do things against the interest of the slaves that were out in the field and like being treated, sleeping in a nice bed, like living in, basically living in the house, and
Okay.
not having to deal with the vigors and problems of the people that were outside.
All right. So you share probably the view of Uncle Tom that 99% of the people share. And really the correct version of that, and you're close, but the correct version of that is that Uncle Tom, he kowtowed or buttered up to the landowner, to the slave owner. He did that so that he could influence the slave owner. At the same time, he was running his own underground railroad and getting black folks out of the plantations and setting them free. So he was playing this game, which was actually quite intelligent. In the end, Uncle Tom was caught doing that, and they hung him. So Uncle Tom is actually a good thing. He was helping his people, but he was just doing it in a way that was politically correct. Let's say he was pulling
No,
the
I
roll.
get it. I get it. And I didn't know that. So that was, look, I don't really, the only time I ever engaged the term Uncle Tom is if somebody's insulting somebody else. So I
Yeah,
only ever knew what they meant by it in the insult, not
yeah, in the insult.
necessarily. But I have
And
heard Candace Owens and others say, like, like you people don't even understand what Uncle Tom is, like, blah, 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 blah.
yeah,
And, truth be told, I never went to go find out. So, like, it's one of those, slugs on me for not doing it, I guess.
no,
But
no,
at the
no,
same time,
no.
it's good to hear,
Yeah,
and it's an interesting story. I think that's a twist that most people, it's making me want to go buy the book now and just like, tear through it and make sure I check that one off the list, and, and make sure I can speak to it if it ever comes to bear. But that was a
yeah.
good lesson because I didn't know that.
Well, the point of bringing it up was not just showing that I know something that you don't, which is always fun. But the point of bringing it up really is that the whole culture is so upside down. And when you try and right the ship and get on a different path, then you're put down, which that's what led to the whole, Uncle Tom thing, which again is an absurdity because he did that. He was very calculating in with the reasons that he did that. But the culture is upside down. So going back to Whoopi Goldberg, I think to myself, geez, how about a mile high view for a change instead of just having this emotional view? I get it. Yeah, you were raised in a crappy environment and you had to coat hanger yourself, and that was her first abortion somewhere. And so it's still a very emotional and a bitter thing for her. But the fact of the matter is that her people are being in a sense, systematically held back, not systemically, but systematically. And the reason I say that is because, you know, it's a system that's in place, but it's not throughout everything. And they're falling into that whole system. And their population is 50% less than what it could be right now, right? Or whatever that number is.
Yeah, and look, it should be noted that other races were as soon as Roe v. Wade passed, all the races were on the same trajectory straight up for like 2 or 3 years. It was like as soon as they like got this so-called right, that everyone just started whacking babies right and left. And then all of a sudden you see everybody start to taper off on the graph, and like and so but you see the black population still rising, and then they stay high, where everyone else starts to come down, like they're still staying high. And to me, like after understanding Margaret Sanger and what she was all about, and what I mean, there was even that one director of Planned Parenthood who's like who like spoke to the fact that like there was always this issue with some staff about Margaret Sanger, and like how Planned Parenthood would address it. And like to the people who think, oh, that it was just such a long time ago, that's not what they're about today, and blah blah. Like, yeah, it is what they're about today. And they've been praising Margaret Sanger right up through 2015 when they quietly stopped giving the Margaret Sanger Award out to people. You know, Hillary Clinton was a winner of that. Ted Turner. There was Jane Fonda. I mean, all the classic doo-doo-doos all won this award. And you know, and I showed the Clinton quote of her saying how much she admires Margaret Sanger, and like, and I'm not listening to anybody telling me Hillary Clinton did not know what this woman was all about. Like this woman like ties in. I mean, it just ties together the whole, you know, for those that want to believe that there was a switch in the parties and all these things, like this just ties it all together. Like the Dixie Democrats never went away. You know, Margaret Sanger was a psycho of the era. Eugenics was a big movement among these psychos, and Planned Parenthood is the lasting legacy of that movement. And again, you know, the proof is in the numbers. When you look at the results are just devastating. As far as, you know, if you're trying to make the case that Planned Parenthood is not going in the direction that, you know, that Margaret Sanger wanted it to go, then you're going to have a hard time doing that when you look at the numbers. And when you listen to who do they all, you know, who are they all the most concerned about? All these people, what group are they most concerned about with Roe v. Wade being overturned? Minorities, right? It's all the inner cities. It's all because that's where, you know, again, that ties in as well. Like they're not upset in general. All you hear from these people are, you know, oh, this is going to disproportionately affect minorities. Yeah, it is. Like a lot more are going to survive now.
Yeah. Well, you know, what's interesting too is that you were talking about Hillary Clinton, and I remember Bill Clinton back in, the 90s, and he said something to the effect of abortion should be legal, but it should be rare. And so the other part of this whole thing is the lack of humanity. If you look at some of the protests that are going on right now, and the signs that they have, and the way that they're acting, and saying things like, "Oh, just rip it out," and it's almost as if there's no humanity, there's no soul to these people. And when I hear someone like Whoopi Goldberg talk, she goes, "Oh my God, it's a hard thing and it's a terrible thing." You know what? I get it. It should be. But then, because this is proliferated to such a degree, there seems to be now, unlike when I was growing up, this whole mass of women that are so quick to jump up and wave and say, "Rip it out, rip it out." They don't care. And so where would we go from being such a hard thing and such a difficult decision to, que sera, sera, it doesn't really matter.
When did it become that babies were it? Like, when did we start calling babies it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like I guess the point of it, what a lot of people haven't learned civics in a very long time. And when you listen to people and their views of what's constitutional, what's not, what determines a right, what doesn't, like when you listen to people's views on these things, it's clear that and it's been intentional. I mean, we've talked about this over and over. Like they intentionally want to confuse people about how this constitutional republic is supposed to work. And when you look at what the Supreme Court decided on, like, because they're ignorant to start with, because they don't understand, how the Constitution works, what's constitutional, what's not, what makes something constitutional or not. Like the fact that they don't understand any of that is why they don't even understand what this decision really was.
Right.
Like they don't. Like they read headlines and they read the clickbait stuff, and they don't realize that the Supreme Court did not take action to save babies. This was not a moral compass that the Supreme Court was following, and nor has it been for any of the judges over the decades who have been, saying that this stands on shaky ground and will likely get overturned one day. Like, none of them were saying that because they're Christian, or because that's just their personal belief. They were saying it because under the law, this should have never been heard, and that's all the Supreme Court said. So, like, for those that are celebrating, saying we're going to save all these babies, I think we need to stop and see what the actual end results of this are, because I don't know that that's going to be the case. I don't know that. Look, what's to say this is not going to just turn into, like, if we don't make the internal moral changes, right? Then and everyone's still thinking about this as if it's just still okay to kill a baby. They're just telling us, they just said it's up to the states to say whether they allow it or not. If everyone still believes in their core, and not everyone, most people don't, but if this many people still believe that it's perfectly okay to do, then they're just going to go to another state and do it. You're just going to have you're going to have these clinics in other states be overloaded. Maybe more of them will open up. The activists are going to be out there. People, the Gavin Newsoms of the world, are going to start, funding more abortion clinics and funding more to handle the nation's. And there will be, probably 6 or 7 states that will still be aborting babies at almost birth. But, like, they're still going to be there. Right. They're not going, and if Congress ever legislates it, like, again, it's not like they didn't rule that abortion is unconstitutional. Like, that's not what the ruling was. Right. the ruling was, this is not something that should have ever been in our this should have never been on our plate.
Yeah, it's not covered by the Constitution. That's it.
Right.
That's it.
Right.
And if you want to make laws about it, we're not here to make laws. And so make your own laws.
Right. So, like, the fight there is not over, right? And it's, I mean, for those who are pro-life and really, really want to nail this thing down, so to speak, then that comes out of your legislature. Not just locally, yes, it comes out of your state legislature, but just like they can pass a law legalizing it, you can pass a law making it illegal around the country. And therefore, it's the exact opposite, but it's completely doable. And therefore, states like California, New York, etc., will have to engage in nullification. Like, they'll have to engage in nullification and be like, we're just not going to follow, and start that battle. But they'll be in a position to have to do that if that type of a law got passed. But I mean, in the end, the Roe v. Wade decision, to me, in the end, was not overly groundbreaking. I mean, it was because now those states, are able to. I mean, it's definitely going to save lives, but, like, how many? I need to wait and see what it comes to. And then we got Darren Wayne Smith. He says all this decision means is that democracy and sovereignty of the states matter. Yes, exactly. It means that the original decision was unconstitutional. That's right. Absolutely. And that's kind of what we're saying, right? I don't know how late I caught on to this comment, but that's the gist of it, right? Is that and really more specifically what they're saying is, we never, not only is it not have nothing to do with the Constitution, we never should have heard this in the first place. We were never in a position to make decisions as to when a life becomes viable. Like, that's just not something courts decide.
The funny part about this is that, I mean, the big words, using the words of, the far left, inclusion and diversity, right? This was a step towards inclusion and diversity. It, by all, definition, with staying in line with the true definition, because what it did was, now this decision included everybody. This country was split in half on how they felt about it, right? But people were forced into watching their tax dollars go to support something that they were opposed to, right? So now the federal monies can't pour into this any longer. So if federal monies can't pour into it, our tax dollars are not going to be going to supporting it, right? So you're basically you're including me in the flexibility, meaning I can be in a state that doesn't participate in it and doesn't use any of my tax dollars for it, right? Or you could
Right.
be in a state where my tax dollars go for it and my state is allowing it to occur. You could be included in either environment. That's your decision. But this country was split in half for a good reason. And now we have the opportunity to see how that plays out. And, let's see what the different halves do, right? Are they going to move
Yeah,
at
and they said as much in that rough draft, in that first draft of the opinion that they put out. Was that like if you read through it all, it was saying like that, this was something that was incredibly divisive, 50-50, like there's no settled debate on this. And then that's when they got into, this is why we shouldn't be deciding on this. Like
right?
this is different in every state, and for us to do a sweeping decision on stuff that we're not qualified to talk about would be ridiculous. And it was ridiculous. And even Ruth Bader, a staunch a proponent of abortion as she was, understood that this case was like the worst. Like she understood that this case was not on good standing, and was very concerned that it would one day get overturned for that reason. And look, this comes down to following the Constitution or not. And like, people need to understand that it's okay if you don't like something that's in the Constitution. Maybe there's something that's stopping something that you want to see happen or whatever. But the path is not to just find a judge to overturn that. The path is to do it correctly, and it needs to be changed.
Mhm.
And like, no, but look, we're advocating consistently for Article 5 and the calling of a convention of states to impose term limits, to bring fiscal restraints to the government, and to stop government overreach. We do this, we advocate this on so many episodes. I can't even begin. I'm still waiting for Ohio and Ohio, I think it's Iowa, and New
Pennsylvania.
Jersey, we're still waiting on. Massachusetts. There was some, although Massachusetts, even though they have phenomenal leadership over there in the grassroots, it's still Massachusetts. So you gotta, tongue in cheek that one. But Pennsylvania is still, they actually were looking good, right? So like,
Mhm.
and I think, I think it takes me back to, and look, maybe people will see it this. I don't think there'll ever be enough public support to do something constitutionally with abortion. Like, there just won't be. Like, there will never be. It'll never make the threshold to do something. It's not a neutral issue the way term limits are, or the way fiscal restraints. Those are things that everybody can agree on. The whole abortion issue, you're not getting everybody to agree on that ever. Like, you're just
No.
not. It's not going to happen. So in the end, I don't see the change in the Constitution being a path. But look, if you if these Democrats stop being Marxist, then maybe they can get enough people to pass legislation. But they are Marxist, so nobody likes them. And that's what it comes down to. Like, Marxists have completely taken over that party. The few sane ones left, are now are being talked about like they're sellouts and conservatives, right? I mean, that's what's become of the Democratic Party. I was watching David Rubin. Uh, he was having a conversation with some guy from Fox. I forget his name, but he said something that I found interesting. He said he was talking about Bill Maher, and he's like, right now, Bill Maher is being accused of acting conservative, or becoming conservative, when really he's not moving to the conservative side. He's just moving to sanity. And it just so happens right now that the opinions on the side of the scene are being labeled as bad, and tend to be associated with conservatives. So like, things like, you know, all the woke stuff, and men can have babies, and all this ridiculous madness, you know, gender fluidity and all this stuff, 63 genders, people calling themselves they, like all of these things, he sees for what they are as being crazy. But when he speaks out against them, he sounds like a conservative. But this is still a guy who's livid that Roe v. Wade got overturned. Still a guy who can't stand Donald Trump. He's still a guy who can't stand George Bush or any other Republican that ever walked the earth. He gets into dialogue with them. When I say can't stand, I mean disagrees with almost every policy they have. But he's being labeled like a conservative, and I think that that's interesting and funny, because what is a conservative today? You know what I mean? If you're just sane, you seem to be a conservative.
He's still a lefty.
Right.
There's no doubt. He just doesn't want to go that extra yard.
He's a classic liberal.
He's a classic liberal, but he's not going to go off that deep end, and that's where to the progressive end. Let's say. But then
you can't follow the party, is what I'm saying. So, when you're not willing to go off that deep end, are you still a Democrat?
Well, only time will tell. It doesn't seem that that's the case right now. But then they're going to get their butts kicked come November, and then we'll see what happens. I think right now like we've said before, Trump frightened the hell out of a lot of them and the globalists. And when Trump was out, they put the pedal to the metal and started pushing their agenda as fast and furious as possible, right?
But look, they were successful in handling Trump, though. Let's face it.
Well, they were successful. You mean in getting rid of him?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. But the thing is that I think what he did was he put them in a position to really accelerate their plans, where they just jumped out into the open and started going full force, to the point where people are saying, "Hey, enough is enough." It woke a whole bunch of folks up.
It did. And look, aside from the justices, that's probably Trump's. Before I had said Trump's greatest contribution was the eyes that he opened, but in reality, his greatest contribution was the Supreme Court justices. Those three that he picked, and Kavanaugh's a little wishy-washy, but Gorsuch is a man after my own heart. That guy, he's so to the letter of the Constitution. He's just he doesn't give a damn. He don't come out. Constitution doesn't say that. Constitution doesn't say that. He just come out with that. He even writes his own opinions when the majority rules, in the direction he wants. He writes opinions to be specific about what it is that bothered him. When they wrote the opinion on the mask mandate and said, I'm not the mask mandate, on the vaccine mandate, he went and wrote, because they wrote the majority opinion basically all around what Congress had specifically authorized OSHA to do and blah, 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 blah. But Gorsuch wrote his own on the side saying, you know what, even if Congress did explicitly give them the ability to do this, then all that would mean is that now we're looking at how Congress is abusing its power. And he understood, he was this Congress can't give them the power to do this kind of overreaching, broad type of stuff. And he's the only one on the bench that did that. He's the only one on the bench that came out, not Alito, not Clarence Thomas, none of them. Now that could be because they knew that they were going to rule that way anyway. But he wanted it to be a point. And it matters that you make a point out of it in these things, because those types of things get read later in courtrooms when people are deciding, what the rationale for a given decision was. And when you come in and make something like that clear, you're giving, if they try to do something like that again, and someone has now Gorsuch's opinion, to step up and be like, here's a part of the majority opinion, on that case, and get into the fact that Congress has no right to give those kind of powers to a third party agency. So, in the end, look, this justice team, this hall of justice, if you will, for the Supreme Court, I'm thanking God that these are the men and women that are in place now. but I can't help but be incredibly worried about our future, because it's just this whole, it needs to get addressed before it goes away, before people stop thinking about it, and before it, like, because then when it comes back hard, these guys get old, and all of a sudden, because they'll wait, right? If there's anything the Marxists have taught us, is they'll wait. They've got patience. They've been at this for over 50 years waiting for the right moment, and now, I guess it was Trump who triggered it, but these globalists, the Klaus Schwabs, the Great Reset, these coconuts, they've been waiting to do this for 50 years. And if they got to wait another 20 or 30, they'll wait. They'll wait. They'll come up with a narrative as to why the world didn't end from climate change already, and still use that as their pretext. But the reality of the matter is, if we don't do something about it, and I don't know what the perfect answer is. And if someone watching this wants to comment and give a suggestion, I mean, we talked about each state picking one justice, and so far it's the only idea that I think could fly, unless the states voted as a conglomerate for a smaller group of justices. Like maybe that would be, like the states would appoint, like the states would vote on a legislative level. You know what I mean? Not on a populist level where it's an open election, but they would just vote on individuals and then decide, or the president can suggest or appoint, and then it gets approved by the states instead of the Senate, or something along those lines. But like, that's the only path that I see. If the presidents are continuing to just appoint these people directly, it sooner or later it's going to create a mix on the court that is not going to be constitutionally minded, and is going to be thinking about living documents and all of that jazz, and they're going to go in and straight out rewrite the Constitution. And it scares me to death that my children, like, this court will probably be around for most of my lifetime. You know what I mean? You figure we got like 20, 30 years of this group, to be in place.
Well, part of the problem too, George, is that we the people are not constitutionally minded. There's there's been a very poor job in terms of educating the average American on the Constitution.
It's not a poor job. They intentionally didn't do it.
Yeah,
like
well,
it was a strategy. It's not.
yeah.
It was a great job if you consider what the intention was. Like,
Well, okay, fair enough. But one of the things is that we the people need to understand the Constitution, and if you have it becomes part of our culture, right? And you have this national mindset that's oriented towards upholding the Constitution, then the chances that you're going to have this, Marxist court go off the edge, because the people are going to recognize it. Right now, they just don't even recognize it, and I think that's why our Constitution, the annotated version, is actually 3,000 pages right now, right? It's gone from a little pocketbook to a gigantic, encyclopedia-looking book, and I think a lot of people don't even realize that.
yeah, and that's like people saying, the Convention of States argument, where they're like, well, they're not following the Constitution now. What makes you think they're going to follow it, then? And it's like, they do follow it. It's like they do. They uphold the amendments more than anything else. Like, if there ever has been something done off base, for the most part, it's been, to the articles, not to the like the Commerce Clause and things like that. But the amendments have been upheld pretty solidly, throughout. I mean, it's, the Second Amendment has been under assault by the left for over 100 years, and every single case of precedent that's been in front of every single Supreme Court has defended the right to bear arms. That has understood that regardless of the malicious speak, the right to bear arms shall not be infringed. So in the end, interpreting, there's no other way to interpret that. And that's the key, is if you're going to make an amendment, it's got to be clear language, simple, clear language. like not a 50-page, 50 pages of gobbledygook that nobody understands and whatever. It's just a few sentences. That's all it takes. So you want to do a single item, uh, a single subject amendment. All right. So you write it like, no bill written by Congress in either house shall be on more than one subject, and that, any additional subjects intended to be added must be put into separate bills and voted on separately, et cetera. Like, there's no way to misinterpret that. like they're telling
Right.
you. I mean, I would take it further and be like, it's got to be no more than 10 pages of number 8 font. Like I'd go a little bit further with it, just to make sure. Even 10 pages is probably too much. But, I mean, in the end, our governing documents were what, 4 or 5 handwritten pages?
Right. Right.
Handwritten. So, I mean, because they were clear, they were to the point, and they didn't need 1,600 pages and 1,200 pages of add-on and all of these legal, like, they didn't need all that. They're like, this is pretty simple. It's really hard to think about, but once we figure it out, it's pretty easy to articulate. And then they were able to put it in reasonably quickly, without without issue. And it's held up pretty damn good, over the last 235 whatever years. So, look, in the end, the judges scare me. I don't, I'm not. I mean, I would have liked to got more opinion. It seems like everyone's a little bit silent today, but in the end, I would have liked to get more opinion. But the fact of the matter is, the judges scare me. They
Right.
do, even when they're on my side. The whole fragility of that situation creeps me out, and like. And something, we got to address it beforehand. It needs to get done in this convention. The convention is going to be the first opportunity to do it. And if nothing else gets through, like I said, it is what it is, but this would be a big one to get through. Even if nothing else got through, if we were able to do something to change this, then that, I think, would at least set us in the right direction. Because term limiting these people before we have a new system in place for them would scare me even more at this point. Because now I'm like, all right, well, now this crew's going to be in for 8 years. Like they're like the only thing stopping the First and Second Amendment from getting upended right now. So, like, what if they fix the next freaking 2 elections? And now, all right, 8 years go by, the whole group gets taken out and replaced by what president? You know what I mean? What president is that would replace the whole lot? Right now, imagine Biden had to replace freaking 9 judges. We'd be
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
We'd
It
be
would be
done.
over. Yeah.
Be a freaking nightmare. I want to die. I'm like, you know what? Like it's just something. It changes now the way that I'm thinking about the term limits piece too, because you know I realize how fragile this is, and like, so there has to be some alternate system of appointing these people that's not going to scare the crap out of me and make me think that just because there's one cult of personality gets elected, and it happens to be on a year that the majority of judges are coming out of term, that he gets to pick a crap load of judges. Like, I never really put that much thought into the judges piece, but now I'm starting to think about it after all these court decisions, because it's freaking me out a little bit. Like I don't know what, it's one of those things that's just sticking with me, but whatever. I mean, it's done, right? So far, so good. Let's do a little celebrating in the fact that at least the rulings that have come down have been on the side of the republic and have been, constitutionally correct, right? That if for nothing else, we should celebrate that, and that, yeah, Clarence Thomas probably has limited time left, but the rest of them, they'll be there for a little while. We probably at least got a decade out of Alito, maybe. No, yeah, a decade out of Alito, and then we've got the other three who are, Thomas is probably, maybe 5 years. I don't know how long you think Thomas can stick around. I don't know.
Between 5 and 10.
I mean, if 2024 comes and we get a DeSantis or somebody like that, and we are not calling the convention to correct this issue yet, then Thomas should step down and let DeSantis pick the replacement, because at that point, we need to solidify that spot for another. We can't wait. We can't wait like Ginsburg and have him on his deathbed and showing up to court with a broken rib at 85 just because, he's afraid and then she dies just before the bell and gets replaced anyway.
Right.
So you can't let that happen either. So in the end, it would be prudent to kind of plan for that. But and I don't know. I mean, I'm waiting to see these 2022 elections, to be honest with you. I know True the Vote is True the Vote now is starting to organize something with sheriffs where I guess they're organizing like an alert system for sheriffs in real time during the elections that should be interesting. That should be a matter of now the question for me is, now I know some of our followers and such have commented on some of these where they said that there are these organizations who are starting to put people at these drop boxes 24 like I don't know how these states still have drop boxes. Like after seeing 2,000 Mules, I don't know how they still have drop boxes. But I feel like with all these drop boxes still out there, like it's still leaving the election open. Like I don't know, like 24/7. You're gonna. I mean, you could have someone at the drop boxes 24/7, but it's just like that's a lot of organization, a lot of and I don't know if that's going to happen. And we'll see, because I could tell you, anyone who's worth their shirt knows if there isn't some sort of red wave coming in November, and I don't want to hear, oh, Roe v. Wade made the difference. Like that's nonsense. No one's voting for a Marxist because of freaking Roe v. Wade getting over. Like that didn't even have anything to do with the politicians. Like the idea that that's going to be a deciding issue in the election, that's all in the minds of Marxists. That's not real. So the question is, if they pull this off and they gain a majority in the House and the Senate, and because now they're going to want to fix it more than ever. Like that's the way I see it. Like now, like I feel like 2,000 Mules or not, these people, the engines are revved up. They're like, screw this. Get all your freaking people together. We're going after it hard this time. Like we're taking the House and Senate back because we want to pass a bill, right? Before Biden leaves, they want to pass a bill that's going to formally legalize abortion. And if they do get to rig the election successfully, then this Roe v. Wade thing will be celebrated for 2 months and then completely turned over. I mean, it'll be worse than it was before for pro-lifers if they're able to do that. So we'll see. I hope the pro-life people have just as much vigor as the pro-murder people, because if they don't, we're losing this thing. And because that they're going after it. All those Dominion machines, they're winding them puppies up. they're downloading all the software they need. They're starting the engines on all the trucks to pick up at the drop boxes. Like they're getting the entire machine rolling right now, and they don't give a damn if they get caught or not. Like I guarantee you, this is a moment in time where they're more than willing to get caught, and they're going to go after it. Like they didn't have any problem stopping the elections in the dead of night so that they could regroup and recalculate and truck in whatever they needed to truck in. They ain't going to have that was a presidential election. They ain't going to have a problem doing any of that stuff for a House and Senate election.
Yeah,
they ain't going to have a problem with any of that.
We'll see what happens. But I if we do not have a landslide victory on the Republican side, then there's something wrong, because nobody is satisfied with the economy right now. No one.
No, everyone hates these people.
Yeah.
Like outside of Los Angeles and whatever, and you know what? Even in those places, I think they're starting to hate these people. Like you see this district attorney in San Francisco gets thrown out. Like everyone's starting to get annoyed by these people. There's only so much crap you can take before you start saying, you know what? If for nothing else, like this is how Giuliani got elected. It was just New Yorkers saying, we are so tired of living in squalor and listening to your excuses. It's been decades and the same talk track is coming out. We have nothing to lose. by trying Giuliani. We have nothing to lose. And they did it, and they won big time. They won, and when I say they won, I don't mean Giuliani won. I mean the people in New York won big time. Within 2 years, the entire city was cleaned up. Crime was done. Safest large city in the world. Like, boom. That's what you get for changing course. So, I honestly think people are in that frame of mind right now, and we'll find out in November. We'll find out because in November is when you're going to see, whether or not even if it's close. Like, I'm not comfortable. You know what I mean? Like there was a point made the other day. Like just because you lost doesn't mean you weren't cheating. Like not all attempts at cheating are successful. So like you could be cheating and still lose. So like if it's like dangerously close, I'm still gonna call nonsense. Like I'm still gonna call. Like there's no way this should be even in the stratosphere of close. There's no way. Yeah. And I feel like it will be. Like I feel like they're going to be engines revved, full speed ahead, like getting caught. Who cares? They're going to be talking these people into it, these mules or whatever you call them. They're going to be getting these people fired up, and they're going to get these people out. Like, hey, you get arrested, don't worry about it. We got the DA. We'll make sure nothing happens. Blah 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 blah. And they'll believe them because they've been getting it done for so long now with these DAs that they'll just go out and we'll double the pay, and we'll now it's $20 a ballot that we'll pay instead of $10, and whatever it takes to get all these people out there, they're going to do because now they're motivated to do it because they want to legislate Roe v. Wade back into law, and if they get the House and the Senate, if they hold the House and they get a bigger majority in the Senate, that's exactly the first order of business is going to be to pass an abortion bill. That's going to be the first order of business. And it's going to be completely legitimate when they pass it. And now you're waiting full turn for the entire House and Senate to turn over. But if they pull this in November, I don't think you'll ever see the House and Senate turn over. Because I think at that point, we've just given up. At that point, we've just accepted the fact that our elections are going to be fixed, and we're going to yell at each other about with these talk tracks of big lie and whatever, and just pretend nothing's going on. But in reality, of course, we all know the numbers don't add up. But yet here we are. All right, Jack, we're hitting on an hour and 15 minutes here. Do you have anything else you want to go over? I don't have enough comments here to even make a big deal about the comments. So
no, I'm good.
All right, sounds good. So, folks, we're going to be on every Wednesday, 5:30 p.m. Pacific time. Do keep in mind, if you're still with us, keep in mind the links. We're having this issue with putting out the event first and then going on. It doesn't with Facebook. It doesn't line up with the event, which causes us to have to break all the links and just go back on again. So if you see the event notification, just know at that time we're going live on a different stream. There'll be a different link that's coming in. I may just get rid of the event notification altogether. I'm not sure yet. Or we may just find a whole new streaming software, but we'll figure that out. But I appreciate everybody coming on. Those who commented, thank you for your participation. Make sure you click the like button, smash the follow button. And I believe, I will check right now, we are 10. I repeat, 10 subscribers away from our coveted 1,000 mark, which we originally wanted to do in 1 year. Our first streams came out in April of 2021, but we were suspended for 4 weeks on YouTube, so that knocked 1 month out. So we're almost on target. So we'd like to get those 10 right away. So if you like the content, even if you're not watching on YouTube, check out the link go to YouTube, look us up there. You can find it from our website as well if YouTube won't show us in the search. And then just go ahead and smash that like and like button and bell. All right. Until then, Jack, anything? Nothing?
That's it. Good night.
Well, away we go. I'm out.
And like that,